Hello and welcome to another installment of Prophecy Update Radio. I'm your host, Pastor Dave Hart, and I'm delighted to have in the studio with me today best-selling author Bill Salus. Bill has a new book out called The Next Prophecies. The Next Prophecies is book 2 of a projected trilogy that puts a possible chronological order to the prophetic events of end times. The Next Prophecies book is the sequel to the Now Prophecies book. The Next Prophecies will happen soon after the Now Prophecies, and the stage is being set for their fulfillment. Author Bill Salus and I have covered in the previous 2 installments of Prophecy Update Radio many of the chapters in The Next Prophecies. You will certainly want to get a copy of this book. You can simply go to Bill's website at prophecydepot.com, or you can go to amazon.com and simply put in Bill Salus as a search or the book title, The Next Prophecies. As I said, this is part 3 of the installments of our discussion regarding the Next Prophecies. The author of the Next Prophecies book, Bill Salus, and I will continue to discuss the Ezekiel 38 Gog of Magog invasion, the pre-tribulation time gap mystery, satanic supernatural deception with super signs and lying wonders, the rise of the Antichrist, the lawless one, the revealing of Mystery Babylon, which is the harlot world religion, the opening of the sealed judgments, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, world wars and famines and pestilences, the decline of Islam, Allah loses his Akbar, the false covenant that triggers the tribulation period, Christian martyrdom, the 5th seal saints, the 2 mysterious witnesses of the book of Revelation, as well as the tribulation temple. In this series of radio programs, Bill Salus and I will be exploring and explaining some of these next prophecies. Stay tuned for part 3 of the Next Prophecies here on Prophecy Update.
First of all, the Muslim, we'll tackle that one just briefly. I don't believe he'll be a Muslim. We know the proof text is he comes out of the revived Roman Empire in Daniel 9:26, people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. Many of my colleagues and I have talked about, hey, listen, if he's a Muslim, no Jew would trust a Muslim to guarantee their security, and the Antichrist confirms a covenant for Israel's security in Daniel 9:27. Also, if a Muslim came out and did what the Antichrist is going to do, he's going to come out and say he's above all things called God. He's going to declare himself as God in the temple of God. Any Muslim that did that would be, a fatwa would be issued on his life, because you cannot say that. I mean, Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. That's one of their 5 pillars of faith. Also, he would be an apostate Muslim if he did, because of that reasons. There's a few other reasons also. I argue that Allah is going to lose his Akbar, his greatness. I kind of humor about that Islam's best days are behind it, because you're going to have 2 Muslim wars that I believe would happen before the tribulation. I believe Psalm 83 happens first, and then it's followed by Ezekiel 38, 2 different prophecies. Psalm 83 involves 10 Muslim populations that surround Israel today, and you got Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, the Palestinian refugees, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the Saudis are probably in it, the Egyptians could be in it. When they're defeated by the Israeli Defense Forces in Psalm 83, that's a punch to the gut of Islam.
Yeah.
And then it's followed by Ezekiel 38, which there's 9 populations listed there, and Russia is the only one listed there that isn't Muslim. All the other countries, Iran, Turkey, countries from North Africa, parts of East Africa, they're all Muslim. So they're going to be defeated not by the IDF, but supernaturally with an earthquake, fire, hailstone, and brimstone. God is going to stop that. And when that happens, that'll be a punch to the jawbone of Islam. Yeah. So that by the time we get to the tribulation, Islam is going to be knocked down on the canvas for the 10 count. That's how I kind of put that. So now, what would he be a Jew? Okay, the other question comes up, would he be a Jew? Well, a lot of people think he will be. But the problem I have with that concept, if the Antichrist is committing final genocide of the Jews, and in Zechariah 13:8 we quoted it earlier, he would ultimately have to kill himself. Because the point being, why is the Antichrist killing the Jews? Well, Jesus Christ said in Matthew 23 to the nation of Israel, he said, "You will no longer see me anymore," because they rejected him as the Messiah nationally. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You will no longer see me anymore until you say, Barak haba Hashem Adonai," meaning blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So Jesus set down a mandate. In other words, he's not returning in a second coming for the Jewish people, for the faithful remnant, to set up the kingdom, the Messianic kingdom, until the nation of Israel, which will be represented by a third of the surviving Jews after the Antichrist tries his Holocaust on them, until they realize that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Hosea 5:15 tells us that that's when they'll do that, in their persecution. Hosea 5:15 says, "I return to my place until you recognize your offense, and in your affliction you will see, call out to him." So he's returned to heaven. He came to the earth. He's now returned to heaven. He ascended up to heaven. The Jews will recognize their generational rejection of Jesus. That's the offense. And they'll do it in their dire time, when in the tribulation, when the Antichrist is trying to kill that final third. And they'll say, "Jesus Christ, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," and he will return for them. And so if the Antichrist is a Jew, he's trying to kill all the Jews, so no Jew can say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." He'd have to kill himself as well.
Right.
I think is the argument there.
Yeah. What do you think about the Antichrist being of Nephilim descent?
Well, it's interesting because he's going to be empowered by supernatural signs and lying wonders by Satan. And part of what Satan is going to perpetrate is what the Bible calls, with the definitive article, the lie. Something is going to come across the earth that's going to just shred the biblical narrative. It's going to be perpetrated by Satan. Some people believe that you will have the UFOs. You'll have alien extraterrestrial beings. The Bible actually talks about a time when there'll be a war in heaven in Revelation chapter 12 between Michael, the archangel, and Satan. Mm-hmm. And Michael will win, and Satan and a third of his bad angels will be cast out from heaven for good. They will actually come down to the earth, and it says, "Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, for the devil has been cast out, and he knows his time is short." So, the interaction between angelic beings, in this case fallen ones, and on the earth coming in the tribulation period is not that's biblical prophecy. So the thought that you could have the lie could have something to do with UFO deception that we're seeing now and things like that. Full disclosure, hey, you're not alone in this universe, people. There's other intelligent beings. Which the Bible tells us that's the case, we know as well. That would rip the biblical narrative out the window, right? So people would be going, oh, we were created by aliens, not by a God of the Bible or something like that. So right. It's an interesting argument. Yeah. I don't think that's the case. But
I don't. Who are the signatories of the covenant of Daniel chapter 9 and Isaiah chapter 28?
Yes, Dave, and we spoke about Daniel 9 earlier. Daniel 9:24 tells us that 70 weeks are determined for your people, Daniel's people, the Jewish people, and for your holy city, Jerusalem, the holy city, the Jewish people, at Daniel's time. So we know that Daniel 9:27, which talked about that false covenant, we know that it is dealing with one of the signatories to the covenant being Israel, because these 70 weeks are devoted toward Daniel's people. But it says in Daniel 9, vaguely, it says that the Antichrist is going to confirm a covenant with many, which would be Israel and some other party. You can't have a covenant if you don't have two parties, at least two parties involved.
Right.
So where we get more information is in another proof text about the false covenant in Isaiah chapter 28. And it says there that we get the details of who the other party is. And some more details. And Isaiah tells us in verse 14 and 15, Isaiah 28, Therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scornful men who rule this people who are in Jerusalem. So let's stop there for a minute. Understand how the Lord is feeling about the leaders of Israel at the time that the covenant is confirmed. They're scornful rulers, scornful men. And he says, you have said, you scornful rulers, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we are in agreement. When the overflowing scourge passes through, it will not come to us, for we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood we have hidden ourselves. So what Isaiah is telling us here, he's telling us who the other party is, and he's telling us why Israel's even participating in this covenant. So the other party is death and Sheol, so we've got to put a face on them, and I'll show you where they show up in the end times. And then we find out that Israel's concern is there some overflowing scourge being perpetrated throughout the earth that they don't want to overtake them as being perpetrated by whoever death and Sheol represents. That's why they want to have a covenant with them so they can avoid the overflowing scourge that passes through. And it says that they do this under falsehood, and we've hidden ourselves in lies and refuge under falsehood. So in other words, they understand that they're not necessarily in agreement with what death and Sheol represent in the world at the time, but they find it politically expedient to make a covenant with them for their own potential purposes.
Right.
And I point out in the book, well, what they're really wanting to do, the true content of the false covenant, has nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli peace scenario or the Palestinian and peace with the Palestinians and the Jews. There's no scriptural support for that. And it seems to have everything to do with the Jews wanting to build their temple, because I show 3 different proof texts in the Bible as to why that's what it's probably dealing with. But I don't want to get ahead of myself on that. So we have to say, well, who is death and Sheol? Israel can't make a covenant with intangibles like that.
Right.
And what is the overflowing scourge that they're perpetrating? Well, it turns out that the pale horseman of the apocalypse, the 4th horse, remember the Antichrist is the white horseman, the 1st horse.
Right.
Fiery red horseman is 2nd horse, that's wars on the earth. Black horse, the 3rd horseman, is famine, scarcities, and pestilences. And then the 4th horseman comes on the scene to rein in that chaos that's going on. And it says in Revelation verses 7 and 8, when he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name on him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So where do death and Sheol come onto the scene? They come onto the scene as the 4th horseman, in my estimation. Death and Hades is riding the pale horse. Now, Hades is the Greek word for the Hebrew word Sheol. So it appears to be that this global controlling network here that has authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill. Now, let me just qualify that. Some translations say have power over 1/4 of the earth. The New King James, the New American Standard, says they have authority over 1/4 part of the earth. Now, most of my colleagues would say, well, this means the 4th horseman is killing 1/4 of mankind. And some estimates are 1 billion people. John Woolward says that could maybe even be 1 billion people. I say, let's take a closer look. It says authority over 1/4 part of the earth is given to them to kill it. It doesn't necessarily mean they're killing 1/4 of the earth.
Right.
It means they have control, like a global network, over 1/4 of the earth to accomplish their purposes, among which is to kill the dissenters. Now, if you think there's 1 billion people on the earth that were getting killed, 1/4 of the earth, like John Woolward was suggesting, let's say there's 1 billion people that this entity has control over, authority over, to do their devilish deeds, to kill. That's a powerful network, and that's a powerful way to look at that translation. Now, compare the verbiage on the 6th seal judgment that talks about killing 1/3 of mankind. Let me read that. It's a different judgment versus the 4th horseman in the seal judgments. Now we're dealing with the 6th trumpet judgment. But I want to read it because the text is very clear. And it's different than what the 4th horseman's text is. And what it says, Revelation 9, verses 14 and 15, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. Now, there's no doubt that those bad angels are going to kill a third of mankind, but that's not what it says on the pale horsemen. It says they were given authority over a fourth part of the earth to kill. To kill with swords.
Right.
So they may be killing a fourth of the part of the earth, but that's not technically, in my estimation, what it says. But who they are killing turns up in the fifth seal saints, among who they're killing. And those are those we talked about earlier, who are slain for their faith, for their testimony. And they're asking God, how long, O Lord, until you'll put an end to this? Because they don't know how much longer that's going to go, because they have probably died in the time gap period. That's my argument.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's just the way things are worded can mean several different things in Scripture, and you have to be very careful about how you interpret or take these things. In the next few chapters, we talk about the judgments of Revelation chapter 6, the seal judgments. Can you tell us why does the traditional view put all the seal judgments inside of the tribulation period?
Right. We talked about the premise earlier from the traditional view, which puts, like you said, all the seal judgments in the tribulation period. It's based on the major premise, which is that the teachings that Daniel's 70th week of the tribulation period can't commence until the covenant of Daniel 9:27 gets confirmed by the Antichrist. We also said that covenant is in Isaiah 28 verses 15 as well, other proof text. But then the minor premise is that the covenant can't be confirmed until the first judgment gets opened, the seal judgment gets opened, because that's when the Antichrist now comes on the scene. And so that is total logic. That makes a lot of sense, but I pointed out that does not necessarily mean that's when the covenant gets confirmed. But they say that, well, if it's confirmed right there in the first seal judgment, then every sequential judgment of the seals, the second, third, fourth horsemen, the fifth seal saints, the sixth seal, etc., would have to happen in the tribulation period, because the tribulation has already started when the white horseman, the first horseman, comes on. So I understand. That's logical. But I pointed out, well, the Hebrew word for covenant, diatheke, is not even listed in those verses. So, so I would say, sort of in a summary, the traditional timing view of the seal judgments is that the false covenant gets confirmed and the tribulation begins when the first seal is open. The alternative timing view, which I put forward in this book, and I put 2 chapters in the book. One is the traditional timing view, because it could be correct, but I put the alternative view, which I think is correct.
Right,
and,
chapter 9.
Yeah, so I say in the alternative timing of the view, it's a little different. The false covenant does not likely get confirmed until sometime after the fourth seal is opened, because that is when the other signatory to the covenant, which is death and Hades, arrives and the overflowing scourge gets perpetrated. So what's going on when the fourth horseman comes on the scene, remember the agreement on Isaiah 28 was you'll make a covenant with death and Sheol. The fourth horseman is death and Hades. I believe that's who Isaiah was alluding to. Fourth horseman in Revelation chapter 6, verses 7 through 8, death and Hades. They're killing a lot of people with sword, hunger, and they get control over a quarter of the earth. And I believe that's the overflowing scourge that we read about in Isaiah 28. Remember, Israel says, you make a covenant with death and Sheol in agreement so that when the overflowing scourge passes through, it will not come to you. Well, I believe that overflowing scourge that Israel is concerned about, that motivates them to negotiate the false covenant in the first place, is all the killing that's going on with the fourth horseman of death and Hades. They don't want to be the next victim. So that's why I say maybe that false covenant doesn't happen until at least the fourth horseman's on, because he's the other signatory. How can you even have a covenant with a party that's not even on the scene yet? And that doesn't happen until the fourth horse. And why is Israel concerned? It's because they're killing a lot of people, and they don't want to be the next victim. And then the fifth seal, they're asking how much longer that's going to go on, the deaths from the fourth horseman. So essentially what I'm saying is, hey, listen, we're probably not even starting the tribulation period until at least the fifth seal has happened. Now the sixth seal, definitely, that's talking about the wrath of the Lamb has already come. So by the time you get to the sixth seal judgment at the end of Revelation chapter 6, the tribulation has had to have started by then. But I'm just suggesting it might not start until in between that fifth and sixth seal in there.
Something that intrigues me about that passage, power over 1/4 of the earth to kill. That really doesn't say that the pale horseman is going to do the killing. It means that he has power over 1/4 of the earth to kill.
Well, they have the authority over the killing.
Right, but it doesn't mean that the pale horseman is doing the physical killing himself.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. Well, so the differentiation is, the traditional teaching is that the fourth is they're killing 1/4 of the earth. Now we're saying, well, that's not necessarily what it says. They have authority over a global network, which is about 1/4 of the earth in population. Now, I personally think that that's the harlot world religion, represented by the fourth horseman.
Interesting,
because the harlot world religion, it says in Revelation 17:6, verse 6, is drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. Now, the fifth seal saints would be martyrs of Jesus because they're dying for their faith. Now, and I also connect that with being the Vatican, the Catholic Church, and I go into deep reasons in later chapters in the book. But so here's the question: is the Catholic Church actually killing people? Well, remember when the Catholic Church and the harlot, it says, is drunk with the blood of the saints, so that if it is the Catholic Church, that could represent the Inquisitions, where they were killing the heretics.
That could happen again.
But what was happening is they weren't necessarily doing all the killing. What would happen is they would adjudicate against a heretic, call him a heretic, and then turn him over to the secular authorities for the execution.
Right.
So, because that may be how that plays out. I don't know. The best thing we can try to do is identify who we think these people are and how they fit in the book of Revelation. And, again, we're looking at a point in time in the future. We're looking through a glass dimly. We don't know exactly how things are going to work at that time. But everything's different then. The supernatural is the natural. The paranormal is the new normal. There's a lot of bloodshed and death and violence, and lawlessness is abounding, which is sin metastasized.
Right.
And then the world's clamoring for the Antichrist to come on the scene, and Satan's throwing supernatural signs and lying wonders out there and perpetrating a lie. Harlot world religion is killing a lot of people. It's an overflowing scourge. The Jews are being concerned about that. They go to the table to confirm a covenant, of which they think is politically expedient, so they can build their temple. Because when they build their temple, they believe that will bring the Messiah. Israel today does not believe Jesus was the Messiah. They're still waiting for their Messiah to come, and they believe that by building the temple, one of the reasons for they say that if we build a temple, that will hasten the coming of the Messiah. Well, when the Messiah comes, he'll get rid of who's perpetrating the overflowing scourge, and he will send them into their messianic kingdom, which is the High Testament of Old Testament prophecy. So you can see what's motivating the scornful leaders of Isaiah 28:14 to embark on a covenant, even though they don't agree with the harlot world religion or death in Hades. But they believe, listen, if we can get the upper hand here, we can build our temple, we can bring the Messiah, and then he'll deal with that problem.
Right. We've kind of covered the alternative view of the sealed judgments in Chapter 9. In Chapter 10, you talk about death and Hades representing the harlot world religion. And we've discussed who death and Hades are of the fourth horseman. And we've discussed death and Sheol in Isaiah chapter 28. But how is death and Hades connected to that harlot of Mystery Babylon?
Yeah, see, this is the big one, because there are two killing campaigns after the rapture. One is the harlot, which I read in Revelation 17:6, is drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And then ultimately, the Antichrist is also going to be doing martyrdom as well. He's actually going to be beheading Christians who don't take his mark. So we're told in Revelation 13, verse 15, when the Antichrist is in power, he's granted power to give breath to the image of the beast and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. That's in the false prophet and the Antichrist and that image of Revelation 13. And then remember, that's when it goes on and says no one can buy or sell unless they take a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. Mm-hmm. So that's then with the Antichrist's time in the sun, his kingdom. And we're told in Revelation 24, then I saw the souls of those who had been slain had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God that had not worshipped the beast or his image. So we see that Antichrist is going to be killing believers for not taking his mark.
Right.
And prior to that, because the harlot world religion comes in first.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this installment of Prophecy Update Radio. I'm your host, Pastor Dave Hart, and I've been discussing Bill Salus' new book, The Next Prophecies, with the author himself. If you would like a copy of Bill's book, The Next Prophecies, you can go to Bill's website at www.prophecydepot.com, or you can go to Amazon.com. Simply put in Bill's name, Bill Salus, that's S-A-L-U-S, or you can put in the title of the book, The Next Prophecies. Until our next installment of our discussion with author Bill Salus on The Next Prophecies, may you grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.